Following on from my video last week looking at Big Chief Studios' James Bond from Dr. No, I thought I would follow up with Live and Let Die's Solitaire. Starting with the packaging, the first thing to comment on is the very different approach we have to the art style of this packaging compared to the Dr. No figure that we saw last week. The overall design is a lot more simple and a lot less colourful. That said, it is still quite striking in its own way. We do of course have that gun barrel motif, which is really nicely done, and in the centre of it we have a greyed out photograph of the toy, which I think looks very nice. Underneath we have the Live and Let Die logo, but it is in that metallic font, which I think is really nice, and it catches the light really nicely. And I have to say also, you'll notice the eye on Die is a dagger and it has that red handle, which I think is a really nice touch and it really stands out. But I think it's fair to say that overall this is quite bland packaging. It's quite classy looking, but it doesn't have the wow factor when put on display. That said, I do really like the approach of the side panels. We have two different photographs of the figure, again in grayscale, but we also have that wonderful Live and Let Die logo with the metallic font, which I think looks really good. This looks very classy, I like this, and of course there's always the opportunity to be able to stack these up with other figures in a collection and have a pretty nice display if you put them on your shelf. The other thing worth noting about this packaging is that it's a lot broader, it's a lot thicker and bigger than previous figures in this line, which is quite nice. On the reverse we have more of the same. We have another grayscale photograph there with a bit of a backdrop behind it. We have that Live and Let Die logo once again, and a little bit of information about the character. So again, I think this is pretty presentable. It's not particularly colourful, but it is handled very nicely. Now, when we slide the lid off the box, underneath we can see a splash of colour. We have a wonderful photo montage of Solitaire, and of course if we pull this cover out, it does also double as the backdrop as well, the diorama piece for this figure, which is fantastic. So this is nice and colourful, it's got some lovely images here, and as I said, when we flip it over we have that backdrop for the figure as well, which is pretty fantastic. Obviously taken directly from the film, and this looks really good. Now then, moving on to the figure herself, I'm going to be honest with you from the start and say I have very mixed feelings about this figure. There are dramatic highs and dramatic lows, but I'll start with the highs and say that the presentation of this figure is second to none. It's absolutely gorgeous. I think they've done a pretty fantastic job with the head sculpt. If we take a look at the likeness here, you can see this is a pretty strong likeness of Jane Seymour. I think this is very well done. I can't really fault it, to be honest. It looks pretty much spot on to me, and I think they've done a really nice job of the paint tabs, particularly in the hair. There's obviously a lot of different washes running through that to give it that texture, so we can see obviously browns and blacks and little hints of blonde here and there, which is very nicely done. Likewise the jewellery, the earrings, the necklace, which is just one rubber piece, but it looks really good. Now, I've always thought that Solitaire had some of the best outfits of any Bond girl from any Bond film. They always look so luxurious and interesting and just visually rich. And hopefully you can see here that Big Chief have done a fantastic job of replicating this costume. I think the colouring is beautiful. They've used a fantastic sort of felt material to a costume, so it feels very luxurious. It's a very nice quality. And if we look at the detailing up close here on the patterns that are just perfectly sewn into this dress, it's just beautiful. The colours are pitch perfect. The way they've been painted, for lack of a better word, just looks fantastic to me, and this is what it's all about. It's bringing this character to life in the 1/6 scale, and I think they've done a tremendous job. Likewise, if we look at the sleeves, I just think this looks incredible. Just such fantastic detailing here. This is a slightly different material. This is more a leathery kind of material. It's not leather, forgive me. I'm not sure what material they've used, but it's really good. And it's also quite stiff as well. There's a wire in there to make sure that it holds its place so it never looks out of place, and it looks fantastic. And you're going to see so much detail in this pattern, which is wonderful, and the individual tassels that are on the sleeve. It's just, wow, awesome. She also comes with a handful of different hands, pardon the pun, which we will see a little bit later on, but I just want to just look at a couple of them up close so you can see the level of detail in those hands. You can see the individual rings that have been painted on, and the fingernails in particular. I think these look very nice, but I'll go into a little bit more detail later. Likewise, the bottom of her dress again has that wonderful patterning. It looks very authentic to what we see on screen and is very nicely tailored, and they've done a really excellent job of this. This also carries through to the boots as well, which I was really pleased to see. She does have these platform boots and they look fantastic. They are made of the same material as we see on the rest of the costume, so it has that sort of felt feel, wonderful texture, and it looks absolutely exquisite, I have to say. At the back, there's also a working zip, so you can zip these boots on and off. I just love this feature. I think it's just attention to detail, which I think is fantastic, and it just looks really cool. So I think they've done a fantastic job of this, and as we'll see a little bit later on, it doesn't hinder the articulation in any way, which is absolutely brilliant. As with the other figures in this series, she does come with her own base, and of course she has her own frosted glass nameplate that can slide in there and that lights up. The base is touch sensitive, so when you touch it, it should go on and off. Now, I did find mine to be a little bit unresponsive in truth. It took a little bit persevering to get it to go on. It's not quite as effective as the Dr. No James Bond that I have. But nevertheless, I do really like this approach. I think it works very, very nicely. As I mentioned in my last video, I perhaps would have preferred to have had lights around the base, so it's shone up and added a bit more light to the figure when it's on display in a cabinet, say, rather than just being on the nameplate. But nevertheless, I do think this is very attractive. Now, in terms of articulation, this is where things start to get a little bit more choppy. She does have a ball joint in her head, so she can move her head all the way around, up and down, side to side, lean from side to side. Pretty much perfect. I couldn't fault it in that. The one thing I would say, though, about this body is that it does feel a little bit cheap. The plastic feels a little bit more brittle, and it feels a little bit more cheap. And I did notice a fair amount of resistance sometimes when I was moving the joint, not from a sense of being stiff, but from a sense of I felt like I was in danger of breaking this, so I had to be very, very careful. She does, of course, have ball joints in her shoulders, so she can lift her arms up and out, and you will see there is that butterfly joint in the shoulder there as well, allowing her arms to come forwards and all the way back, which is fantastic. Now, she has an upper bicep swivel, of course, and there are double joints in the elbow there, allowing her arm to bend to 90 degrees, which is great, and perhaps even a little bit further if you're willing to push it. Now, she does have a ball joint at the wrist, so she can rotate her hand all the way around, and of course can hinge it forwards and backwards. But this is where I started to notice, in particular, some particular issues with this figure, and how perhaps it's a little bit more brittle and not quite as strong as I would expect for the price tag that is associated with this figure. To show you what I mean, I took the hand out, and as you can see, it's on this little joint here, but you can see how there's that huge gap, and that doesn't look particularly strong, does it? It does feel like it could just snap apart at any moment and fall apart, and yes, you can just snap these back in place, but you can see that it shouldn't be like that, especially at this price point. Now, she does come with spares, which is good and probably needed in my case, and while I'm on this point, I will just point out that you can see with the hand there that actually the hands are made of a rubber, so they can't be moulded, and there are some issues when it comes to holding items, which we'll see a little bit later. Now, she does seem to have some sort of ball joint in the ab area, so she can lean from side to side slightly. She can't really turn too much to the side. It seems to want to always return to centre. It won't really hold its position, at least not on mine, which is a little bit disappointing. However, she does have a bit of a crunch, which will allow her to bend forwards and backwards. And as you can see here, there's actually a fairly decent range here, which is pretty good to see. So no issues in that department, but a little bit concerning that I can't really get her necessarily into all the positions I might want to have her in if she's just leaning to the side or whatever it may be. There is a feeling like she's kind of always got to be looking face on. Now, there are ball joints in the hips, of course, allowing the legs to kick out to the side. This is restricted a little bit by the dress naturally, but there's still plenty of give and room here, which is great. There is an upper thigh swivel as well, and there is more articulation down the bottom of the leg as well, which is allowing the leg to move from the side to side. The legs can kick forwards and backwards, but again, hindered naturally by the dress. There is double joints at the knee, so of course you can kick her legs all the way back if you wanted to, roughly to 90 degrees, which is great. And there is a ball joint in the foot as well, which is very neatly disguised by that fantastic boot there, but of course you can move it up and down and from side to side. Now, I do think she's one of the best when it comes to accessories, because she comes with quite a lot of extra goodies, which is fantastic. She has an extra 3 pairs of hands, which is fantastic, along with a pouch for her tarot cards, and of course 2 decks of tarot cards, and I have to say they've done a fantastic job of these tarot cards because they are faithfully recreated from the film, and incredible detail for such a small scale. I think they've done a really nice job. I really like these. The only criticism I have of these cards is that they do tend to be quite flimsy. They're a very thin card, so they are able to sort of be distorted or tear very easily. So quick point to be very careful how you open them because they are sealed in a sort of plastic when you first get them. You have to sort of break that seal, so be careful when you open them. But I have to say I love these. I think they've done a tremendous job with them, and I love how faithful they are to what we see on screen. But that's not all, because she also comes with her chair, which is very nicely padded. It's very simply designed, but it is very screen accurate and it looks great. I really like this. She also comes with 2 stands, and these are made of metal, which are the basis for her table, and of course she has the glass table as well. And I have to say I really love this because you have a sort of a ready-made diorama for this character, and you have got a perfectly built environment, which I think is fantastic. And I have to say, in terms of the presentation, this looks absolutely tremendous. As I said, you've got this built-in sort of environment, which just looks fantastic. You've got a ready-made scene here, which I think is lovely. And if you put your Bond figure next to this, then it's going to look fantastic. And of course, the pièce de résistance is that backdrop as well. When you put that into place, wow, you've got a scene from the film. This looks pretty fantastic to me. I love this to bits. I think the presentation is fantastic. In terms of her holding her pouch and her cards, yes, she can, but I wouldn't say the grip is as strong as I would like, particularly when it comes to holding an individual tarot card. It's not quite as tight as it needs to be. I tend to have to rely on gravity to be able to hold this in place, and that's not good. And part of that comes down to the fact that our hands are that rubber where they're not molded in a way that they're tight enough to be able to hold things as tightly as I would like, but at the same time you can't move the fingers either to be able to increase that grip. So you are always fighting against that, unfortunately, which I think is a real shame and a missed opportunity. But if you persevere, you can get great shots like this, and I still think the overall look of the figure is fantastic. So then, overall, in summary, I think this figure looks the part, absolutely. This is a really classy looking figure. I think it's really rich and sumptuous in terms of the materials they've used on the outfit. I love the paint tabs. I think the likeness is really strong. I think they've done a pretty fantastic job of this all in all. I love all the various accessories she comes with. I love that she comes with this table. I think is glorious. I really love these tarot cards and how detailed they are, and that she has this chair as well. I think all of this is top notch, and exactly what you'd expect from a figure at this price point. But that said, I do have some issues around the quality control. I'm not overly impressed with the hands being made of that rubber, although they look nice. If you look carefully on the sides of them, you can see that rubber seam which runs up and down them, which is disappointing, doesn't look great. But moreover, it's the weakness of the joints in particular that really bothers me. The plastic used feels quite cheap and quite brittle, and really you'd expect it to be a lot higher quality for a figure at this price point. Also, I did notice with my backdrop that it isn't quite evenly aligned. You can see there is a big crease in the side of it. It's a minor criticism, but nevertheless, when you're paying this kind of money, you expect it to be a lot more smooth. So all in all, a little bit disappointing in some areas, but the overall presentation of the figure is absolutely perfect, and I do love that she has a ready-made sort of diorama, which is fantastic, so she's always going to look brilliant on display. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.